Hello and welcome to the 50 Women Over 50 podcast. I'm your host, herrilynne Starkie. On this podcast, I highlight women who have broken down barriers, challenged the status quo, or have simply lived remarkable lives beyond the age of 50. So far, my guests have included pioneering entrepreneurs, passionate activists, artists, educators, and more. Get ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered as together we extol the lives of 50 exceptional women over 50. Today, I'm welcoming New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author Bridget Cook-Burch'S to the show. She is the CEO and founder of yourinspiredstory.com and believes in the power of stories to change the world. Her clients call her the book whisperer, and her powerful work has been showcased on Oprah, Dateline, CNN, and in many more top-tier media outlets. In this interview, she shares how her 50th birthday was a day that turned a corner for her, and how, on that day, she decided to take control and set goals for the impacts that she wants to make with her life. And she shares how she's shaping her own legacy each and every day. All right, why don't we start with you telling me about your 50th birthday?
My 50th birthday. So my 50th birthday was very special in regards to my husband. And there was a point at which I thought I might be single forever after being married once and unfortunately ending in quite tragically. So after thinking that I would be single on my 50th birthday, it was wonderful to have a very loving husband and have flowers and I cracked up too because none of my children realized that I was turning 50. In their minds, I was much younger. There were other things that were happening. And so we didn't end up having any sort of spectacular whammy. But in terms of where I went for my own self, it was a very interesting thing because turning 50 for me was a major turning point for so many years and generations. And in our culture and other places is that 50 really means over the hill, and especially for women. Women in music, women in the arts, women in film. There have been so many who have suddenly after 45, 46, they drop out of things. And I thought, I feel like I'm just getting started. What is this? And so I spent some of the day on my 50th birthday actually doing some intensive research on what it means for women to be aging in our society. I read some extraordinary books, and I spent that day actually prepping to have a new inner revolution and to decide who I'm going to be in my 50s, in my 60s, in my 70s. So I remember attending a Tony Robbins conference at one time, and he said, what are you gonna look like when you're 70? Are you going to have muscles and have strength? Are you going to be stooped over? Will you be using a cane? When he went into some things, and so all of us in the audience were just imagining what it means to be 70 years old. Mm-hmm. And then he said, are you going to look anything like this? And out came this strapping, handsome hunk of man that was ripped when his shirt was off, but he was totally ripped from top to bottom. And he said, whatever it is you had in your mind is what you're going to be.
Yeah.
And I had never forgotten that. And so I've joked that I'm going to be learning how to surf when I'm 90, and I plan to live till I'm 120.
Okay.
But my 50th birthday, I realized I hadn't set goals. I didn't do anything for the interim, for my health, for my well-being, for where I was going to go, what kind of impact I was going to have on the planet. And that day turned a corner for me.
Yeah, sounds like. But I want to pick up on something you said, that your kids didn't believe you were 50, because usually kids think you're 30 years older than you actually are, because from their perspective, everything's old. Right?
Yeah, it was shocking to me too, because I am the old lady, the old woman, the matriarch of the household. But yeah, they couldn't believe that I had turned that, but I had to laugh.
I remember as a kid when my dad had to start wearing reading glasses, man, we ripped the mick out of him chronic for 2 years. And when it happened to me, I think I was 42 and I was just a second. How come Dad was old when he had to wear glasses and I'm so young and I have to wear glasses?
Oh, that's funny.
It is about the perspective.
Good karma for you, wasn't it, Sherilynne?
And so what surprised you most about stepping into your 50s and taking on all these new challenges and goals and objectives that you had for yourself?
Well, I would say there was a couple of things. So in terms of as I have grown older and I've tried to do certain things gracefully, and I have a beautiful husband who said, I'd rather you look like Betty White at 90 than Joan Rivers. So he's not expecting me to do all the nips and tucks and all the things that sometimes I look in the mirror and I would like to do. But there has come, I think, for me, a freedom. Mm-hmm. There was a time when I was more afraid to own my voice. And even though I was in leadership, even though I ran a trucking company, even though there were a lot of things that I have done, there were certain areas and aspects of life in which I would just keep that on the low down. I wouldn't share with someone necessarily who I am and what I'm about on the deepest levels of things, or I would share privately, but I wouldn't share publicly. And part of it was always like not wanting to offend someone, to be politically correct, to make sure that I was staying within the norms. And also in terms of, and you understand this, in being so wonderful with your words, I was behind the pen and the computer always, mm-hmm. and behind the lens. And so I turned a corner in terms of I'm not playing afraid anymore. I've done some bold things in my life, but I still was holding back. And I'm like, when am I going to actually own my voice, own my prowess, own my skill sets, own my intellect? When will I do this? And if not now, then when? And one thing I have learned, because I've had a couple of near-death experiences, and that is that we just don't know how much time we have on the planet. You talk about reading glasses at 42. I have had a couple of health scares and I've been able to overcome, and that's been really wonderful. But it really does make me think, what kind of ripple, what kind of legacy do I want to leave? Mm-hmm. And I'm asking myself some questions here that I talk with a lot of gentlemen who are in their 70s and 80s, and they're asking those questions of themselves right now. But I'm asking it today.
Right. So you can actually have an influence on your legacy and shape it. Mm-hmm. You talk about stepping up and stepping out. So can you give me some examples of how you're making your voice heard, whereas maybe 15 years ago you never would have?
Yes, I think most of that is in terms of the storytelling. So the most important stories we ever tell are the stories we tell ourselves. So I began to tell myself a new story, and that was quite important. Mm-hmm. And then I began leaking. I began letting more of my true self come out. I had very conservative parents, just wonderful, wonderful people, but conservative in terms of highly educated. My father was this very left brain engineer. My mother was a teacher, came from East Coast and all the proper manners and things like that. Although my dad could be irreverent at times and would blow you out of the water with his sense of humor. But in public, they were always very apropos. And I stopped being always apropos. I started leaking, as I said. So more of my own personality, more of my own belief systems, more of my own spiritual beliefs in particular, because I haven't followed the predicted path that in my family and in my culture and other things. And sometimes it's been that where people have left, not wanted to be a part of my life anymore. Luckily, not my family, which is very, very openly loving and giving. But I have lost friends because my path has looked different than other people. But in that, I recognize it's one of my innate drivers is my spiritual path. And in life and in business and other things, even when I've tried to keep the curtain pulled tightly shut, it continues to come out. So when I started doing writers' retreats 10 years ago, I would do these very professional retreats and also help people to overcome imposter syndrome, which for an author is so important, because if you're not visible, if you can't allow that deep visibility inside of you, which will come outside so that people can find your book and buy it, right? You won't get to where you want to go. You won't have that impact. And so people at my retreats get over this, but then I would add a drum circle at the end. I would do some other things that I knew would help to cement the leaving of the old self and the bringing in very powerfully of the new self. I started to incorporate other things that I knew worked, and I just continued leaking. So it feels like today I can be more and more of who I really am and who I've been wanting and meaning to be. I just didn't know how to do it and do it appropriately. And now I don't care about the appropriate. I care about saving lives, changing lives, empowering lives. And I get to do it every day now. So the fear never served me. That's for sure.
But you talk about appropriateness and political correctness, and I kind of feel you're running against the tide on this, because in the context of a social media world, there's a lot of people out there have opinions on you, your life, your choices. And so a lot of people would be afraid to do that. Even myself, although I've been on social media since it was invented, in the last 5 years, have really pulled back because of the mobs, basically, and that kind of stuff. It's made it not feel like a safe place to be. Just wondering if you could reflect on that, about how in the social media world, what it is like for your authors to take these kinds of risks.
It's a very real thing, what we're facing in our culture right now. It is a very real, tangible power that holds people back, because they're so afraid of getting slammed like they've seen other people be. They're so afraid of what happens if someone doesn't like what I have to say, or what happens if they turn the corner on it. What happens if what is well-meaning turns to hate in a split second, because we've all seen it. So they have a tendency not to post anything at all.
Yeah.
And it has been, honestly, my authors coming to the table with stories of such courage that have knocked me into this place, because I recognize these incredible, very compelling, oftentimes the biggest hero's journey, conflict character arcs you have ever seen in your life that can change people's lives and worlds. And so for people to not play the PC game and to say, I'm going to share. And it doesn't mean that they're rude, unkind, that they're trying to cause a ruckus. That's not the of PC I'm talking about. I'm just talking about them being able to share raw, real, internal battles and the external battles that they faced, and really be able to get that story out there to empower others. And I've watched people rise beyond the tide of hatred to be able to do it. And it changed things for me. And also proven to me that hatred, if it is a guiding force for humankind, does nothing to lift us up, to help us evolve to the next level. It is a power that we can actually destroy ourselves with. And we've done enough of that through the century.
Oh, we continue to do it over and over again.
Yes.
Through the millennia. It's something that humans just don't seem to learn.
Yes. But it's also, Sherilynne, when you said, what are these authors facing? What can we be doing about it? There is something magical that happens when someone says, I will be that woman or man in the arena. Roosevelt had that beautiful prose about being the man in the arena. And I'm going to tell you what, it is the people with the sweat and the blood and the grit and the determination that will change this tide. And I don't believe that it has to stay. I've seen more people quietly afraid of it, but beginning to have a fire inside of them saying, no, I will be a force for good. I will be a force for love. I will be a force for something positive on the planet. And I think we're starting to see a shift in that tide.
Yeah, I agree with you. I've said on previous episodes that I feel like the young people, that the generation coming up after us, we've done such a good job of raising them with a high level of self-esteem that they are ready to tackle these issues, and they're not going to put up with bullshit that other previous generations would have about this kind of stuff. So I'm really hopeful about that.
I am too. We see it in them young when they're in the classrooms, and they care about everyone. And they are being a rising tide, a rising force, saying, you can't place your us versus them on me. I'm not going to stand for it. So I agree.
What advice would you give your 30-year-old self?
Oh, wow. It would probably have to do with that fear. That exact fear. It's like, stop being afraid to just be yourself. Let down the walls and the masks and simply step into who you are and into your own power. You have so much more than you even have an idea of.
Yes, I agree. And that is a theme that I've been hearing in these interviews. But I think the thing is that 30-year-old women think they're grown-ups now. And they're only at the very, very, very beginning of being a grown-up. It's not like you just arrive and, okay, I'm grown up now. It's a process. And that year 30, it really is where you start leaving your childhood years behind and stepping into your adult life. And it's a hard transition. And I don't think people really understand it until they've been through it and look back on it.
I think you're right. And this is why I've particularly enjoyed your podcast, because there has been so much learned wisdom from the women that you interview on that and to that respect. And do you remember being 30 and we think we've adulted. We know what's going on. We know what we want to do. We know what we're facing. We think we know everything. And then, And I thought 18-year-olds were like that, but 30-year-olds really are like that.
Yeah, for sure.
And then when you're twice that age, then you're like, okay. Yeah.
I feel like I should do another podcast series when I'm 90, reflecting back on when I was 60 and see what I have. When another 30 years wisdom will lend to that.
So it will be fun to see when you're 90 and what your thoughts are about 60-year-olds.
Yeah, those young whippersnappers.
Exactly.
Where do you see yourself in 10 years?
In 10 years, I see more of what I'm doing now. I love what I'm doing now. I spent most of my life not doing what I love, which is stories and people. And now I get to do this every day. I'm writing some pretty intense exposés. There's one that in the next year is going to really rock the planet.
Oh, yeah. Give us a hint.
I will just say that it will change the way we look at PTSD and how it presents. And it will change the way, I hope, that officers treat victims of crime. And it really will. It will knock the socks off of, and it's not my story. I just am honored to be able to help put this together. I think it will also change the way women choose to own their voices. And I want to continue to do this. I can't see myself retiring from these kinds of things. I've also become a publisher in the last few years. And I am publishing some really inspiring stories. So not only being able to do my book whispering, but also being able to help bring stories to light that might not normally get out there in such huge ways. And that is also, it lights up my world to be able to see stories go out and have such an impact. Because first it changes the author. First they have to up level. First They have to see themselves as a greater force for good on the planet in order to get it out there. And so they change internally. It's its own hero's journey. And then when that book gets out into the world, I love seeing the beauty of the fallout. I love seeing the ripple effect because they get to speak more. They get to break bread with amazing people. They get to travel. They get to have this greater impact on the planet. And then I see, like I mentioned, this rising force, this rising tide of people owning their voice and standing for something really good or great on the planet. They're creating movements. And right now, I think we need counter movements to all of the hate. I think there is no greater time in human history than to show up as the leader you are.
Well, tell me a little bit about what kinds of authors come to work with you. Who are your clients that you work with?
I work with all kinds, coaches, speakers, healers, leaders. And I often will get people who, for a time, were unheard. Someone might have stolen their narrative, or a situation or circumstance stole their power. A lie was told, or a lie they told themselves. So they came from a very dark place and then moved in their hero's journey to a place of great contribution to society. And they came back with an elixir of life. They've moved so far past victim that victory is where they're at. And now they just want to gift the world so other people don't have to feel alone, afraid, and that they know that someone is there who's lived this and can walk beside them. So that's generally who I get. Powerful leaders in the making.
Can you just give me a very brief demographic overview of who your potential clients are?
I will try, but I get 19 to 90.
Okay.
Yeah, because everyone at some point realizes that their story is important. Most people who come to me are in their 40s and 50s, sometimes into their 60s, and they have something significant to say.
Right.
So they could write an expensive business card, and there's plenty of programs and people out there to help them do that. But they want to create a legacy. They have something they just want to make damn sure is going to make the difference that it can. And it keeps them up at night. They're not able to focus on anything without knowing that, and I'm doing this. It's this and this. I simply must get this message out into the world. And so I love that because it feels like a pulling or a calling to them to a greater contribution even than what they're doing. So for some of them, they'll come in this space of, I keep being told I have a story and I feel it there. I just don't know how to get it out onto the page.
Right, right.
And then I have others who've been using their story for a time and they're like, I just want to make sure it really gets out in a big way because it's already changing or saving lives. And
right. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's switch to the quick round and I'll throw a few questions at you and just give me off the top of your head answers.
Okay.
Fun round. Okay.
I'm ready.
What are you reading? What are you binging? What are you watching?
Oh my goodness. I am reading a lot of fiction these days and really enjoying it. And then I'm reading a lot of nonfiction too. Smart Brevity is a book that came out within the last year and a half. And it really talks about the power of the word and how to really get into it for society at this point. And it's really smart, especially for those of us that like to go on and on and on. And I will tell you about one of my favorite Audible books that I just finished. 2 titles. So one is called The Rebel in Violet. And it's one of my early students who also works with me quite a bit in editing. She's miraculously talented, and that's Hannah Lyon. And the other one is called Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros.
Okay.
And so I love fictional series, and I also love self-development. So anything I can get my hands on where I will actually improve.
All right. I'll put links to those books in the show notes. Are you involved in any charitable causes or supporting in the community, anything like that?
Oh, absolutely. So when I wrote a book with Rebecca Musser called The Witness Wore Red, it was about the 19th wife who was not only able to survive and to get out of her horrifically polygamous situation, but she also was able to go up against Warren Jeffs, the prophet pedophile, and was able to help put him behind bars for life plus 20 years.
Oh,
He destroyed more than 500 families. And it was this one woman. There were a lot of people who helped. But this one woman's courage in the courtroom that really made a huge difference in being able to get him what he was due. And I learned so much from her. And the first time she spoke, she talked about human trafficking because she was once owned too. And I realized it was about that same time where I was making all of these huge transitions. And I just said, this one woman has had the courage to change an entire community of 10,000 people who believed one way. And now they're beginning to believe something more healthy. And anyway, we started a nonprofit organization called She Rose United. And it was a group of businesswomen who had all been through some particular trauma. And we took a stand against domestic violence, sexual assault, and human trafficking. And we were there to support our women warriors and first responders, most of whom have experienced either rape or some other sort of trauma in the military. And it happens more often than we would like to think. So we started this 10 years ago. We have a program in the prison that has been one of their top programs. And our goal is to get it into 100 facilities in the next 5 years. And this program creates a 100-year impact because it helps to prevent human trafficking, further domestic violence. It's where women can rewrite the stories that they tell themselves, and they can use what has happened to them not to stay a victim, but as stepping stones to a much greater life. And it is working. These women get to, for the very first time in their lives, have a personal bill of rights. It's crazy to know that so many of them didn't even know they had rights as they were growing up. And so to now know that they can own their own body, that they can own their safety, that they can take back their children, that they can have a viably economic and beautiful life is really extraordinary for them. So we're doing a lot in that community. We made this program available online as well to any victims of human trafficking for free. And they can go into our program and receive that training for free anonymously. They just need an email address and they can put in whatever name they want. But we're delighted to get it into the hands of those that it serves. And victims of human trafficking have told us how much this means because many of it they never knew before.
Sounds like a full-time job in and of itself, really. You must be a very busy person.
Too busy, but I have a lot of people with a lot of fire and a lot of intelligence that have helped to bring this. It's a whole team effort on both my business and the nonprofit organization. Really smart women don't do anything alone. And I'm surrounded by other smart women and men.
Yeah, it's so true. Is there an app you couldn't live without?
Oh, there's a couple of them. There's a new one that I have loved called Yucca. UKA. And you can be at the grocery store and you just zap something and it tells you on a scale of 1 to 100, where is this particular product sitting? And it really surprises you. Some things that you think are healthy are not healthy at all. And other things you're like, oh, this is actually very good for me. So that's one that I love. And there's another one. Yeah.
I'm downloading that right away.
It's a good one. Another one I love is called Down Dog. And I can do yoga anywhere, anytime from 7 minutes up to an hour of any kind of yoga I want to do and end with savasana and a little bit of time for meditation. I love it.
That sounds really practical, actually. 7-minute yoga session wouldn't go amiss right now. Is there an over 50 life hack that you can share with our friends in the audience?
Yes. Sorry, I get tender. Gratitude.
Yeah.
I call gratitude the great multiplier. gratitude is what's propelled anything that I do. I'm so grateful to be alive. I'm so grateful to meet people like you. I'm so grateful to write and coach and share and publish incredible stories. I'm so grateful for my family, so grateful for all the adventures that we get to go on. And to wake up in the morning with gratitude sets the stage for a really beautiful day. And if you have never done a gratitude challenge, I would invite you every morning for 30 days to simply write down 3 gratitudes to start your day. And if you forget, I would invite you to write 3 magical moments. Doesn't have to take a lot of time, but 3 magical moments that happened in the day, because it will affect you as you sleep. And then you will wake up the next day already more awash in gratitude to be able to create more.
Well, that sounds like a wonderful place to stop. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Well, it's been wonderful to be with you.
You shared a lot of wisdom. This has been 50 Women Over 50, a podcast for women whose personal confidence is born of experience. Thank you to my guest, New York Times and Wall Street Journal bestselling author, Bridget Cook-Burch'S. She shared so much wisdom, it's difficult for me to summarize into just one sentence, but I really like when she said it's regular people with sweat, blood, grit, and determination that are changing this world, and that we all have this in us. See the show notes to find links to Bridget's socials, her work, and to information about some of the other things we talked about on today's show. And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this show, please share a link to it with your friends and drop me a rating or a review on Apple or wherever you get your podcast from. You can also find my show on YouTube. Please follow me on social media too. Let's get connected. Let's create a whole community of wise women over 50. See you next time on 50 Women Over 50. I'm your host, herrilynne Starkie.